Welcome back, pod people. My guest today is Charlie Steeds, the writer-director of the upcoming Gods of the Deep and Freeze and Barge People and quite a lot of other movies. I first discovered Charlie's work about, I think, 6 months, maybe a year ago when I watched Barge People, and then more recently when I watched the trailer for Gods of the Deep and reached out to him. Gods of the Deep and Freeze are both sort of somewhat loose adaptations of Lovecraft stories, I would say, where Gods of the Deep is a sort of modern day reimagining of the Call of Cthulhu, and Freeze is close to, but not exactly, At the Mountains of Madness. And apart from having that similarity, the thing that jumped out to me about all three of them, including Barge People, is that all of them are set largely on ocean-going or water-going vessels. The Barge and Barge People, the icebreaker explorer ship in Freeze, and the submarine in Gods of the Deep. Do you feel a special connection to the water?
Well, I really love fish monsters. You know, like if I'm going to get hired to make a monster movie, I just have always found that fish monsters are the coolest. So, you know, we've got so many werewolf movies, so many Frankenstein movies, so many vampire movies. But, you know, Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of the classics, but where's all the fish creatures? And it's by far the coolest and sort of most technically difficult monster. So that's part of the appeal. So in the case of Freeze, I was asked to make a film set in the snow, and it was such a broad request that it was like, great, I can kind of put whatever creature I want. So I went straight in with the fish creatures.
All right. Technically difficult, you say. Can you go on a bit more about that?
Yeah, just in that a fish creature is like, you know, compared to, for example, I've done a vampire movie. You just put the fangs in the vampire, you're done. You know, that's it. Maybe make them a little bit.
Okay.
And then a fish creature, you know, you're head to toe.
Full body prosthetics.
Yeah. There's nothing that. It's not an easy one. You're not going to see many fish creatures on Halloween because you can't really just rustle it up yourself. You know, it's a much more complicated creature.
Yeah. You mentioned the Creature from the Black Lagoon. Those movies, I think there's 3 in the core ones.
Yep.
I really enjoyed those. They were the last of the Universal monster films, but some of the best, and they really tie back to the all the best themes of those movies are the tragedies of like this creature's life. Apart from those, fish monster movies that immediately come to mind are Humanoids from the Deep and Zat. Do you have other ones you would recommend to fish monster fans?
Well, Stuart Gordon did one called Dagon, and
of course, yes.
You know, it's not necessarily fish monsters, but you know, there's fishy people. It's an adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth. So you've got fish-looking people, and I've always loved it. There's something so creepy. I mean, my biggest fear is sharks. So like that kind of comes into it, the sharp teeth and the gills and the rubbery skin, and I guess water. So that's one of my biggest fears. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I was wondering whether you were going to say that you love the water or you're scared of the water, or both.
I mean, I'm scared of sharks. I mean, I love the look of water, like on film. You know, I'd love to make more films. As you say, they are all sort of set within water, but like Gods of the Deep, there was not much water involved. It's all on a set. And then Freeze, again, there was not really water involved. And then, you know, even though again it was on a ship, but the ship's docked. We were filming on a real ship, but it was it was in the water, but it's like it's kind of all held in to the docks with rafters and beams and stuff. And then Barge People was quite a lot of it genuinely on the water, and like lots of equipment was going overboard and getting lost. So it's difficult, but I'd love to do one like right out at sea. Would be amazing.
Yeah. Gods of the Deep and Freeze, both of them, start out really strong. The opening shots, the opening scenes are really great. I took notes while watching it, and I wrote, "Okay, I love this. Great opening shot of the ocean. The sound design, especially, really draws me in, and it's just this constant eerie presence." And
Mhm.
that's something that I found a lot of independent films, if frequently their biggest weak point is the sound design.
Uh-huh.
Whereas with all of yours, I found the sound design very immersive and very well done. Can you talk a bit
Okay,
about
thank
how you
you.
did that?
Yeah, I mean, I do sound design the movies myself. And I mean, I do that because I've learned to do it to basically just cut costs in the budget. I basically, in post-production, I depend entirely on myself. And that is what's got my films being able to, be pumped out one after the other, because I'm not sat here waiting for VFX. I'm not sat here waiting for anything. As soon as I was able to take it into my hands, it meant I could actually make movies for a living and like keep the line of movies going. So I do my own sound design, and I mean, I've not been trained really in sound design, but I just sort of I watch the film, I listen to it, I know how I want to enhance the images, and I know how I want it to sound. And yeah, I guess it's just like something over time I've developed. And but what I was going to say is I do enjoy it. Like I don't enjoy editing at all, but
Oh,
when I get to the point where I'm doing the sound design, for some reason I really enjoy it. It's
well,
like
that's
actually
great.
I feel like the images suddenly are brought to life by all the different sounds. So maybe that's why it works, because I actually like it. And then in terms of the music as well, I take all of that like extremely I focus a lot on the music. Like it's one of the most important parts of the movie. um and so I find a lot of other indie filmmakers, I mean, some people will just use stock music, that's just not even been made specifically for their project. But I've always, since day one, worked really closely with composers, and like in the case of both Freeze and Gods of the Deep, I reached out to composers who I was just a huge fan of them. As in, I came across their albums, either in the shop or on the internet, and I'm a fan. And then I reached out directly to them, and luckily they said, yeah, we'll do it. We'll come and do the music. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So you talked a moment ago about filming Freeze on an actual ship, albeit one that was docked. Uh, another thing I noticed is you frequently have like really beautiful sets, whether they're sets or shot on location. How did you get access to those?
Well, basically, the whole way I sort of concocted Freeze was that I wanted to make sure that I just had three really strong locations, and then the movie would be shot in these very stunning locations. Because when you're shooting with a low budget, people are going to pick holes at absolutely everything. And you know it's just it's just I'm not a fan of horror films, modern horror films that are just set like in a modern horror movie, like in like an apartment, someone's apartment in America, some suburban house. That's so uninteresting to me. I mean, there are obviously classic films that do that well, but you just see it constantly, like all the time. And that's not the sort of horror story that really gets my imagination going. So with Freeze, there was a cave, there was a ship, and then there was the snowy mountains, which we filmed in Norway. And the
Wow.
ship is a museum ship in my hometown in England, Bristol. And it just seemed the obvious choice. Like I've grown up in my hometown, and there's this huge ship just docked there all the time. It's a museum, so even though it is the actual ship, it's open every week. People go in, go around it. It's a museum. There's waxworks in there now. And I was able to strike a good deal with them because I'm a local, and I just was able to kind of sweet talk them and say, I'm a local filmmaker. I can get us a bit of press, and I was able to, get in the local newspapers and stuff like that with information. And also, I told them I was going to bring these fish creatures on board, and hopefully they were excited by it, so we were able to get it. But we didn't have to dress the ship at all, so the detail in the set is just, that location is that location. It's gorgeous and makes my life easier, because we were actually on that ship for 3 days. I think we had maybe 10 hours per day, and we had 25 minutes of the film to cover. And so that's a lot, because I like to shoot sort of like 22 days is my ideal time frame to shoot one of these movies. And to me, that's super fast. But there's all these people out there making them in 10 days or 7 days. I don't know how they do that, but it was helpful that the ship already looked so nicely done up. The details were all there. So all this stuff helps a low budget production along.
Yeah. So speaking more about that, you mentioned not having to do any sort of set dressing. Of course, people were wearing period costumes. Whereas, Barge People, as I recall, was set in the modern day.
Yes.
So what challenges does a period piece present in contrast to a film set in the modern day?
To me, not too many challenges. I mean, I always when producers get in touch with me, see, I love setting things period, and I don't think modern day England is a particularly exciting place to set any movie.
You didn't like Attack the Block?
That's just not my vibe at all. No, like that's what I don't want to be making. Because
fair enough.
I was really young when Attack the Block came out, and but I was already like sort of making short films, and everyone who knew I was making short films, people would say to me, "Oh, I just saw Attack the Block. That's it's a British horror movie," and I'm looking at Attack the Block like, no, that's not really what I aspire to be making. Really, I like more films like The Thing and Alien and stuff like that.
All right.
That's the sort of horror. I like horror that really goes out there. Not exclusively, but like, a horror film set in a British council estate, it's not really doing it for me. I do actually quite like Attack of the Block, so I shouldn't. I'm not slagging the film off, but yeah. So basically, I wanted to set the movie in these other places, and I'm not a fan of the sort of modern look. And producers, I almost always say to a producer when I'm pitching a project, and it's going to be set in like sort of period, it's going to be modern, so it's going to be Victorian England or something like that. I feel it makes the story more interesting to me, and I feel it can enhance the production value. It's kind of an easy way to make the movie look more expensive. So these producers always say, oh, making it period, you're going to add so much more to the budget and it's going to be so difficult, and then it's not going to look right because modern details are going to pop up. And that can be a problem. But to me, I think actually that setting my films in a different time period is like a trick to make it appear more cinematic. So in a way, it's easier. The costumes are a little bit more expensive, that's for sure, but it's worth it,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I'm thinking about British horror films and like when and where they're set. And for period pieces, of course, the Hammer films come to mind. But my personal favorite British horror film is The Wicker Man. Which, looking at it now, because it is so strongly a product of its time, kind of looks like a period piece, although of course it was set in the present at the time that it was made.
Yeah.
What I'm curious to hear your thoughts about those movies.
Yeah, well, so when I made The Barge People, it was the first time I did a script, and I've not done this many times, like making a script that I didn't write myself, because writing's my favorite part. That's what I really love to do.
Okay.
But part of what drew me to it was I was like, it felt like a really British horror movie, because it's set, it's people going on a canal boat holiday, and I'm reading through like YouTube comments when the trailer came out, and Americans are saying, oh, am I supposed to believe that people do this in England? They rent this long boat and just take it down the canal. And I'm thinking, yes, that is exactly what we do here. And that's exactly the point of like making the movie, because it's interesting to sort of take something that feels uniquely British and make a horror movie out of it, because there's I've grown up loving horror movies, and there's not that many British ones that I'm a huge fan of. I'm not at all a fan of The Wicker Man. I really don't like it as a
Oh,
movie.
really?
But maybe when I'm older, your film taste changes through the years,
It's
So
true.
maybe when I'm an old man, I'll one day look back at The Wicker Man and it will work for me. But at the minute, maybe it's because it's so British, and it's like, this just feels like a trip to my grandparents' house. They do this. They dance around the stones with ribbons and wear silly outfits. They
Oh, goodness.
genuinely do.
Yeah.
That's what happens here sometimes. But I do love Blood on Satan's Claw, and I love Witch
Ah,
in general, which are, they're always talked about in the same sort of conversations as The Wicker Man. But it's like I find, like, over the last 5 years, like after Barge, people are really speaking more about folk horror, and I think I hear English horror filmmakers and English horror fans really addressing more, like, in England we make folk horror. It's like this is a uniquely British brand of horror. I know that you can get other countries doing folk horror, but I feel it's something that England does really, really well. And that does connect with me. So I'm always thinking about what is my place as a British filmmaker, what sort of horror movies. You have to think, when you're making a story, you have to think internationally. You think, how are the Americans going to watch this, and how is it going to be perceived? You can't just, and you got to remember that, like, this is what makes you unique, that you're a filmmaker here in Britain, and that English movies, that's your unique export to the rest of the world. So I have tried sometimes to lean into that, and I'm still trying to lean in more to my Englishness, when I'm making horror.
yeah. I have to say, as an ignorant American, when I watched Barge People and they were doing the canal vacation, I was going, huh, I've never encountered this before. I had no idea
Yeah,
this was a
yeah,
thing.
uh-huh.
And when I watch The Wicker Man, it is very much like, this is a culture that I have heard of,
Uh-huh.
but have never seen in person. So
Mhm.
it's interesting seeing those different perspectives there. Um, so I'm curious about the timeline of the production of Gods of the Deep, because at some point during the production of it, the Titan submersible disaster happened.
Yeah.
How did that line up? How did that affect you during the making of this movie?
Yeah, well, the sort of boring answer to it is not at all. It didn't really have anything. If I was in charge, if I was the distributor, this might be in bad taste, but I would have released our trailer right at the time when the Titan incident happened, because it's all over the news. Like,
Yeah.
who I mean, I don't really know if your average person really understands about a submersible, and a submersible becoming crushed under pressure. That's not really something that you think about in the everyday. So when that was all over the news, it was like, in my trailer for Gods of the Deep, it's like, they say a line like, what could possibly go wrong, and then, like, sparks are flying and water's flooding, and it felt like maybe there was something there that we could kind of, maybe it could benefit us in some way. I don't know. But the timeline of production, this is the only film of mine that has ever had a timeline like this. And this has become really a bit of a nightmare production. But I think I wrote the script in 2020. I shot the film in 2021. And then this was during a COVID lockdown here. And then the lockdown ended just before we finished the shoot. And with the lockdown lifted, everywhere could reopen, and all the locations that had promised me that we could film there, because why not? You know, they're empty, it's
Yeah.
lockdown. You know,
Yeah.
suddenly they reopened and didn't want to hear about it. So my locations were, so everything that's shot in the submarine set, that was all done because that was all just a set build. But everything outside of the submarine, which is like sort of the first 20 minutes of the movie, that all hadn't been shot. And so the I sort of scrambled to get locations, and I couldn't. You know, it was a crazy time, because who wants to be listening to some filmmaker trying to hire out your place when, you know, your business has been closed for months and months, and now suddenly you can get customers and you can start making a living again. So actually it wasn't until the following year that I was finally able to secure a location to shoot the opening part of the movie, because you know, I've got a very like tight schedule throughout the year. So by the time those locations had pulled out, I had an edit due, and I needed to go into post production onto a previous film I'd already shot, because I always have multiple sort of rolling on top of each other. So it wasn't until 2022 that I was able to finish the shooting, and then it wasn't until 2023 that I was able to actually commit the time to finish the edit. And so the edit was done, the trailer was done, everything was finished in July of last year. I can't remember when the Titan was, but then, you know, the distributors kind of, they had everything going and lined up, and then obviously it takes a few months for your film to finally get released, and then finally earlier this month it was released to digital.
Yeah. So that's interesting hearing about the overlapping timelines of producing different films. Um, how does juggling all of those work? How do you keep things organized and make sure that the cash flow lines up so that you don't overextend yourself?
Yeah, well, in the worst case scenario, Gods of the Deep can happen. You know, like that is the worst case scenario. You stack everything really closely together, because, you know, the more films I can make in a year, the more money I earn in the year. You know,
Yeah.
I need to do 2 to make a living. If I can manage 3, then I can go on some vacations. You know, and I can, you know, sort out my DVD and Blu-ray addiction and all of these sorts of things. You know, and if I can do 4, even better. So I had 3 stacked up for that year, and in a worst case scenario, something can happen, like, you know, the COVID lockdown ending, and that meant this film it was impossible to find the time to finish the movie. You know, and that's why it was shot in 2021 and it's not out until 2024. For my producers who put the money in, you know, this is really a worst case scenario. You know, it's
Yeah.
not something I should be like talking about on a podcast, really, because usually the situation is this. You know, someone funds a movie and then you go ahead and get it edited as quickly as you can. You know, like, for example, if a new company is working with me, I want to make a good impression, I want to get more funding from this company. So for example, I shot a film in October last year in New York, and next week it will be finished 100% done. And even with that, I've had to fit in post-production of a whole other film in the middle. But you know, that's the faster turnaround. That's what I should be doing, really, but it always ends up overlapping. Something I'm finding is really successful is to shoot 2 films at the same time, and then so you do 2 films and then 2 edits, because it just means, you know, as I said, I need 2 films a year just to make a living. So if I can just book that, then I'm good. You know, so and something, it's just easier and quicker. Like, it's such an upheaval to get everything together for a whole movie, and then once you're going, you're going. So I don't really care if it's 20 days or 40 days or 50 days. Like, once you're moving, you're moving. But if you stop, it can take like 2-3 months just to get everything moving again. So to shoot 2 back to back, to me, is no problem. So that's what I'm about to do in a couple of months.
Excellent. Reminds me of Roger Corman's description of his process in How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime.
Hmm.
Um, he talked about, uh, and I won't ask you if this is a thing you've done or not, but a thing that he specifically talks about doing in um, that book is going to producers and saying, "Hey, I can make this movie for you for $100,000." They give him $100,000. He spends $50,000 on making their movie, and the other $50,000 on making a different movie that he owns
Yeah.
outright.
Uh-huh.
So the way that you were talking about the financials a moment ago, it sounds like you get investment from producers and then that's your income for the movie, and then you're obligated to create and deliver the film. And it sounds like you don't really have a long tail of residuals so much, or is that the case?
I do have a back end, but people don't pay the back end. You know,
Uh,
that's the problem. And you know, I was kind of, do you know what? Before COVID, people were paying the back end, which was just as well because my first 2 or 3 movies were like self-financed. You know, I wasn't
yeah,
I wasn't approaching producers and saying, "Give me money." You know, first of all, in this industry, in this like micro budget industry, you have to prove that you can actually make a film
of course.
first.
Yeah,
And then if you can actually make a feature for basically no money, or you know whatever you have in your bank, and prove that you can do that and deliver it, then you'll start to get hired by people. And so the first 3 movies were all self-funded, and I got nice money back. You know, I had I earned a nice percentage, and I got good chunks of money back, and companies were good at paying me. And then COVID happened,
hmm,
and you know, this creative accounting that happens at all levels of the industry
yeah,
really reared its head, you know. And to be completely honest, since then, I do see some residuals, but not enough to make a living on. Like, you know,
right.
for my first ever movie, you know, I made enough money I could live off it for a year and just do nothing. You
And
know,
that was the self-financed one.
I was a self-finance when it cost me like 2 grand.
Wow. Which movie
And
was that?
the movie is called Dead Man Apocalypse.
Okay.
And I don't really talk about it very much because I mean it's a 2 grand movie. It's so small scale. It's so micro budget. It's essentially is no budget film.
Yeah.
But you know, I went ahead and made that. I really had nothing in the beginning. Like no one was coming in to offer me money or anything. So with almost no resources, I was able to put this thing together. But that made me good money, you know. And now the back end is basically terrible. But I basically learned, you know, just the back end is you might get money, you might not get money, you might get loads of money, you might get a tiny bit of money. It might come in 1 year, it might come in 3 years. I can't depend on that to
Yeah.
sustain a living and to sustain an income. So exactly as you described, producers will reach out to me and they'll say, you know, we want the movie made and this is the budget, and I'll say, okay, you know, I can do it for this. And basically, usually, and it's kind of a mix of both. Sometimes they'll say to me, we want this. So in the case of Freeze, they go, we want a film set in the snow, and then I'm able to create whatever I want around it as long as there's snow that's heavily featured.
That is such a specific and yet general thing to request. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I know. And in a sort of, I guess in a worst case scenario, like a company approaches me and they say, we like this title, Werewolf Castle. So we want you to make Werewolf Castle. So
Oh,
then I go, okay, so I think I'll do a medieval film where there's knights and there's a castle with werewolves in it. You know, it's like it kind of writes itself. But in a way, I'm always allowed a lot of creative freedom on my movies. Like, you know, whether you like them or hate them, I have to take responsibility. They are all me. I don't really have meddling producers, and I'm not even sure that I'm not even sure that the companies even watch some of the movies that I make. You know, I don't know if they have seen the end product. They just
oh
get
my
it
goodness.
delivered and they put it out. You know, um,
Yeah.
But yeah, so in the worst case scenario, they will literally give you the title and you have to go and make it. But then that's probably 50%. And then the other 50% is like Gods of the Deep, where I just have an idea and I have a script. Sometimes I already have a script and I just say, I really want to make this. And then they go, yeah, that looks sellable. Let's do it.
Okay. So given the difficulties with like getting paid by, well, actually, let me back up a moment. It's sort of, I wasn't clear entirely to what degree you were describing working with producers versus working with distributors, or are they the same people and organizations?
You know, that even I'm confused because they've kind of all become one thing. Because when I started, you had the sales agent, and then you had like, you know, you were the producer, and then you had your sales agent, and then you had your distributor. Now they're all rolled into one. The people I work with are, anyway, they are the sales agent, the producer, you know, the financier, and the distributor. They're all of it.
All
You
right.
know, well, those are the sort of people who tend to hire me because, you know, my movies are low budget, so these people can afford to actually pay my budgets and also be the distributor and all the rest of it. So
Okay. So, and you say back when you started, but that was only like 2015, 2016, something like that?
yeah, 2015.
2015? Okay, so not actually that long ago. And yet it sounds like from your perspective, the industry's changed significantly.
Yeah, the industry changes like radically every couple of years, and 2015 is like it just feels so different. Things were so different back then. You know, I think
Right.
I mean, I think I've managed to get in there just in time to like see my movies on DVD on the shelf at Walmart, and seeing those DVDs make huge sales.
Oh,
And you know,
excellent.
all the stores here. I mean, one of my films came out here and remained on the supermarket shelves for a whole year. You know, so
Wow.
every single time you went to the shop in every supermarket, the movie was there. You know, so that's the sort of exposure that today is like, I would love that, but where is Gods of the Deep? Where is Freeze? You know, these are like far superior films with higher budgets, but you can't get them on the supermarket shelf. And so who's going to watch them? Where are they going to be seen? You know?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So, given all of these difficulties and how successful it sounds like your first few self-produced films were,
Uh,
why did you switch to working with other producers instead of continuing to self-produce?
yeah, it's a good question. But basically, I was making films at like such a low budget level. As I said, like Dead Man Apocalypse has a $2,000 budget,
Right.
and sort of like would double for my next film. And then eventually there came a point where it was the distributor who was selling my movies was like, it would be cheaper for us if we could own more of a percentage of the movie, but we'll pay for the whole thing.
Ah,
And so this gave me access to far higher budgets, and now I could do much more elaborate things. And also I'm not gambling my own money, because in the early days, which, as you say, was only back in 2015, so not even that long ago. But back then, I would be working a day job, and then I would quit, and then spend all my money, and you know, literally spend every single thing I had, and then again get a day job, build myself back up, you know, get back into renting my own property and like actually living in a place and not like couch surfing or whatever, and actually having money. And then again, I do the same thing. I'd blow every single penny of it, you know. So it's like that can only last. It's surprising I did it 3 times. It should have really just been the one time, you know, and then move
yeah.
on. I'm an impatient filmmaker, and I'm like completely addicted with filmmaking. Like, in fact, my sales agent at the time said to me, "Why are you going ahead and making another movie? Like, we're at Cannes, we're selling your movie, you're making really big sales. You know, in a few months' time, these paychecks are going to come through, and you could have way more money to make your movie." I'm like, "No, I've already written the script, I've already cast it, and I've already booked the shoot dates. Like, we're going for round 2, you know." uh and that's just, it's maybe a fault of mine, but and it's to this day I continue to make one after the other after the other. I love it, you know.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago that you enjoyed seeing your films on the shelves in physical stores, and that you're a DVD and Blu-ray junkie, which for any listeners, of course, you can't see this, but there is an enormous collection behind Charlie, visible in the background. And you said you were wondering, like, where is Freeze? Where is Gods of the Deep? And I can tell you they're on Tubi. That's where
Yeah.
that's where I've seen your films. So what are your thoughts on digital distribution versus physical? And also, do you guys have Tubi in England? I know that a lot of those are region locked.
Yeah, we don't have Tubi. It's not a thing here at all.
Okay.
And I know of it because I hear Americans talking about Tubi, but I've never been on there, and I don't know which of my films are on there. I think quite a few of them are on there.
Would you like me to tell you?
Yeah, go for it.
So searching for your name, which one feature that they have that is really nice is if you click on a film, it'll tell you who's in it and who directed it, and then you can click on their names and it'll show you all the other movies they've directed that they have. I don't know how they decide on the order to list them in, but the order that they've got them here is Werewolf Castle, Cannibal Farm, Freeze, Vampire Virus, A Werewolf in England, Winterskin, An English Haunting, The Barge People, The House of Violent Desire, Gods of the Deep, The Haunting of the Tower of London, and Dead Man Apocalypse.
Okay, cool. So quite a lot.
Yeah.
People have somewhere to watch them. Well, this is the thing, is I am really old-fashioned in that I love the DVDs and the Blu-rays. I don't even feel like, I don't know, when I buy the DVD and I watch the movie, I remember this movie forever. You know, I've got the DVD, I've looked at the artwork, it's in my head. I watch things on streaming sometimes if I'm like away from home, and you know, I'll forget the next day that I even watched it. Something about it just doesn't stick with me. So I buy everything. Even you know, last week I bought a movie that I know is on Netflix. I don't care. I want to watch the DVD of it. Like, I want to possess it. So for me, I don't. This is what I'm saying. I don't know where people are watching these things. Do people even go on digital and watch these things? I mean, I assume they do. However, one thing I'm not super knowledgeable about, but I do know, is that I don't think that streaming is anywhere near as profitable as DVD. So, like, for someone to watch my film on Tubi, I have no idea the figures and the statistics, but I'm fairly confident that it's like nowhere near the amount of money I would be earning if they'd watched it on DVD. Like, DVD is a bigger moneymaker.
Oh, absolutely. You would probably make a few cents for each watch of it's more like somebody watching your movie on television, where any given individual watching it is going to provide you with a very small amount of money. The hope is that it will reach a much larger audience than DVD would. But who knows whether that's true or not, and if it's being distributed by a third party rather than by you, or you using a direct distributor service like FilmHub, who knows how accurate any numbers that you end up seeing would be.
Yeah, and I don't have like, you know, figures for this or anything, but I don't think streamers, or I've read everywhere that streamers, you know, how can you tell how much money your film even made? Like, with DVD, at least you kind of know exactly how many copies went out of the factory. But with streaming, how do I know that it didn't get watched 1,000,000 times and they're telling you it got watched 100 times?
That is definitely a problem, but also I am curious, like with DVDs, how do you know whether they, printed 1,000 copies or printed 100,000 copies?
Well, it's true. I mean, the thing is, they will give you a sheet that says this is how many copies got sent out. This is how many we pressed, and then you see how many got sold and how many have been sent back to the warehouse. So you do get those statistics. Again, they could lie about them, but at least you go into every supermarket and you see a big bundle of them, and sort of you can imagine, yeah, that looks kind of like whatever,
Yeah.
10,000 copies or what have you. you know, so you've kind of got that to go off. But yeah, and the whole streaming thing is making a difference, even with what my producers are requesting of me with films. So for example, I'm being asked now to put all of my budget and all of my energy into the first 10 minutes of the film, because they need people
Really?
to watch the first 10 minutes to get to the first advert break. And from
Yes.
that point on, they've got the money then. So, you know, because I like old-fashioned horror, so I like horror that slowly builds up to a climax. Like if you watch
Okay.
pretty much any of my movies, they start slow, but by the end, there's all things are going crazy and everything happens at the end in my films usually. But they don't want that anymore. They say it all needs to be in the first 10 minutes. It's like, who wants to watch a story that's fabulous for 10 minutes and then goes horrendously downhill, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, that's not going to leave a good taste in anyone's mouth, but that's the way it has to be, apparently.
That is a really interesting insight. It makes a lot of sense. I also think that there's an effect that psychologists have studied called the peak end effect, where what people remember from an experience like watching a movie is their emotions in the peak, whatever the most powerful emotion they felt during it was, and
Uh-huh.
the end, whatever the last thing that happened that they remember.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I could see it being very effective to make the beginning really dramatic and make the end really dramatic, and then I guess sort of just doodle around in the middle. Um, and I am curious how much you changed the opening of Freeze or Gods of the Deep to fit that pattern that you just described, because I thought that they both opened very strong. Like I don't recall them being especially action packed in the opening, but they were very
Uh,
much in media res, in the sort of like, here is a situation and things are happening in it, rather than here, let's spend several minutes introducing a character and then several minutes introducing another character, etc.
yeah. Well, I can't stand independent films that you turn on and they're just like they're wasting time. You know, they're boring and you feel like maybe this could have been a short film and they've dragged it out into a feature. So, you know, I think I try when I'm writing to make my stories bigger than the 85 minutes I have. And then I try to cram it all together so that it's fast paced, because I'm totally aware that, you know, there's Hollywood movies out there, and then there's all other movies from the 80s and the 90s that people are watching, and you know they're considered classics and cult movies, and then they're, you know, who realistically would want to click on this tiny little low budget movie? Like where is the place of that movie, you know, among everything that you have the option of watching on streaming? So if you are going to click on my movie, I try my best to make sure that we're going and that the pace is there and that things are interesting and happening all the way through. But yeah, I mean, I think these producers make the assumption that, you know, to hook someone in the first 10 minutes, you're going to need to spend money, you know, and have your monster revealed and, you know,
Ah,
whatever explosions and stuff. But I'm happy to sit and watch something, and you can hook me in the first 10 minutes with dialogue and characters. You know, like it's kind of it's a really sorry state of affairs if we're making films in a time where you can't depend on dialogue and characters and performances to hook you in the 10 minutes. It has to be, you know, spectacle, you know, because really it's only characters and dialogue that's going to really make that film get through to anyone. But you know, horror's always had like the opening kill and stuff like that. I have always struggled with opening scenes. Like doing the cold open has never been a strong point for me. In Freeze, for example, I was kind of forced to add this huge opening sequence, which I didn't want to do, but they said you've got to reveal the creature, and I didn't really want to do it. So I had like a horde of creatures in the beginning, and even when it came to shooting it, I was putting it off and putting it off. And then I was so focused on filming other things like the climax of the movie that when we got to actually filming the opening, we only had like a couple of hours. So it's nothing like what we were supposed to do in the script. It's like it's a really kind of lame opening sort of 60 seconds, but then once you get in and you're on the ship, that's how I wanted to open it, and then that's when things actually get moving.
Yeah. To my mind, there's sort of three aspects of the opening of Freeze. There's the very first shot of the enormous, what I now know as Norway.
Yeah.
And then there's the bit inside the cave, and then there's the bit inside the ship. And it sounds like the bit inside the cave is the part that you could have done without.
Mhm.
And I agree that's the weakest of the 3 points. But
Yeah, yeah.
I think that opening on that shot of Norway was a great decision. It really made me perk up and go like, oh wow, this is not just going to be some tiny constrained micro budget film. This was shot at least partially on a really beautiful location. And then
Yeah.
when we get in the ship, it's like, oh wow, now we're either on a set or we're on some beautiful location. I can't tell which.
Uh-huh.
I now know on location on that museum ship.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's was opening with the shot of Norway your idea or the
Yeah,
producers?
so in what I wanted to do, we have the shots of Norway and the mountains and the voiceover, and then we'd be straight on the ship. But I had to wedge in there this guy being chased through the caves by a bunch of creatures, and because I just don't want to have to do it. It doesn't turn out how it should be. But I in most of my films, there's been like a opening scene like that where I've been told you need to put action at the opening, and this has happened like countless times. I've either not shot it or I've shot it and I didn't like it. It just doesn't gel with me. I don't like to do it. I like a slow burn, you
All
know.
right. Have you ever released a director's cut of any of your films that changes that sort of thing?
No, not really. None of the cuts have ever been. I mean, no one's ever really tampered with my edits. I am like requested to add things like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, if it was up to me, I would cut that sequence out of Freeze. But I understand why it's there, and it does need to kind of, if that hooks the people and that's what I'm being told, it's gonna show people that the creatures are gonna come, and otherwise they got to wait 45 minutes before they see the first creature. I get it, like
Yeah.
it's important. I just don't like having to do it, because it feels like I'm betraying the story. It feels like a little cheat, but I like to just follow my characters. I like to think that they're strong enough to sustain people's interest, but the reality is, these actors aren't Brad Pitt, and we've never seen these guys before, and it's not going to sustain everyone's interest. And I'm not some great screenwriter. I'm making B movie micro budget films, so these things are needed. So I just don't like having to include them all the time.
Yeah, and even when the actors of the scripts are strong, you can't know that within like 2 seconds the way that you can know, oh, there's these monsters, the way you can know that within half a second of seeing them.
Uh-huh.
So I yeah. So a moment ago, you mentioned having 85 minutes to make a movie, and indeed, looking at the run times of the 10 movies of yours, excuse me, the 12 movies of yours that are on Tubi, um, only 4 of them are longer than that. Really, one of the 2 of those are less than an hour 40, but Cannibal Farm is an hour 46, and The House of Violent Desire is just over 2 hours.
Mhm.
So where does that 85-minute time restriction come from? Is that self-imposed? Is that a thing the producers say?
Yeah, it's self-imposed, and it comes from this. It's basically in my first. So I've mentioned Dead Man Apocalypse. To me, that was kind of like, it was an experiment. It was, if I make this film, can I actually get it distributed? Like, could I actually be a filmmaker with this film? And I made like a short sort of 60-minute film, and
Mhm.
then they asked me to shoot more on the end. So I just one
Ah,
weekend went to the woods, shot a load of bullshit, 20 minutes of crap, chucked it in there, and that way I could sell the movie. It was really, I was sacrificing the movie. I
is
was like, whatever, I'll get rid of the film, and then I'll be in with the sales agents and I'll be making the money. But then when it came to Cannibal Farm, it was still a self-funded movie, but this was what I treated kind of like as my first time doing, like, it was my first horror movie. It was my first real attempt at trying to actually make a feature film. And for that film and the film that came after, The House of Violent Desire, I'm just trying to make the best experience for the horror fan who's watching the movie. Like, I'm just putting all of my ideas in there, and my imagination was just completely untamed. And so the first cut of Cannibal Farm was 115 minutes, and then everybody who saw it was like, this is too long, like, you need to take this out, you need to take that out. Everyone was trying to make me trim it down to like 85 minutes, 90 minutes. 90 minutes is the current sweet spot. I don't know why, but everyone wants everything to be 90 minutes right now.
That is,
it used to be.
I have noticed personally a strong correlation between a movie being 90 minutes long and me enjoying it.
A couple of years ago, it was 85 minutes. As long as it's 80, like the contract actually says, when I signed to do a film, it says Charlie will deliver a film no less than 85 minutes. It will state the runtime. And so, I did those first two films, and then House of Violent Desire being, almost 2 hours, and with about 15 minutes of deleted scenes as well. And then I'm just like, after that point, I then moved into making these films as a full-time living, and other people were paying me to make them. And so if I can cut down my work, I'm going to cut down my work. So if they're saying 85 minutes, they're going to get an 85-minute movie. I'm not putting in 80. I'm not going to do the 86th minute. I don't get paid extra for that. So I have no problem trimming them down. And you know what? If I make a film that's too long, or if I make a film that's 95 minutes, I love to strip it down to 85 minutes. Like, you always making things tighter. I'm not a patient film viewer. I say I like a slow burn, but things do have to be happening. The story does need to be moving. I want to be seeing new people, new locations and stuff. On top of that, I didn't mention earlier, but in case any of your listeners are wondering, like, if I'm not making residuals, then how am I making my money? When I make a film, I'm given a budget. My fee is a portion of the budget. That's my directing, producing fee.
Right.
That's how I make my living. So, you've been paid X amount for that one movie. As I say, like, you're not going to get paid extra if it's 86 minutes, 87 minutes. But, if it turns out 95 minutes, that extra 10 minutes, that could be a month of work for me. I don't get paid for the month. So, as I have developed, it's like you have to have a business brain on. And sometimes you do just really love a project, and sure, you'll go the extra mile. I'm not that rigid on it. But yeah, I usually come in under what the producer wants me to come in at nowadays. Because I'm cutting as many corners as I can, because you just have to.
Yeah, Gods of the Deep is only 81 minutes long.
Exactly, and that's probably with like 5 minutes of end credits or something like that.
Yeah, so you mentioned before we started recording that you don't really like to talk about exact numbers for budgets and things like that. Is that because you don't want to bias future producers?
Yeah, so like, at the end of the day, it's your job. And if you went into a job interview and said, at my previous job, I was paid X amount, well, then you've laid all your cards on the table. And now your new employer knows, they might have been wanting to offer you double that, but now they know that you worked for that much and were happy. So you're literally putting a price tag on yourself.
That makes sense.
There's filmmakers who come out and they'll say, we made this movie and it was only 20 grand. Great. Now everyone can see that you make 20 grand movies. Or even if your other films weren't 20 grand, you managed to do that 20 grand one, and that 20 grand one's been a huge success. So why can't you do more huge successes for 20 grand? So now you've literally put a price tag on your head. So I'm okay to talk about budgets of my previous films, like I said, Dead Man Apocalypse, $2,000.
Yeah.
Well, I'm never doing that again. That was I was 21 years old. I just graduated film school. That was then. Now I do this as a full-time living, and I wouldn't. People know I wouldn't make money. I wouldn't make a movie for that little money.
Of course not.
So, yeah, that's why I think people are smart to talk in broad terms. Like, you'd say, I make these films for under $100,000 or something. So I would say to people, I make films under $100,000. And I
And
think
that's 100 British pounds, I presume.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, I mean, it's kind of important in a way to put some sort of scale on it, because viewers are kind of obsessed over budgets. I don't really know why people are so obsessed with budget, because to me it's kind of irrelevant to the movie. Like the budget of the movie is irrelevant, and unless the viewer knows how the budget is spent, it's like, do you know how I'm spending $100,000? Like, do you know what the actors got paid? Do you know how many shoot days the film was? No, it's like, it's completely none of anyone's business. But at the same time, you don't want people watching your film, like, for example, Gods of the Deep is a good example. You don't want people to watch Gods of the Deep thinking, well, their budget was $1 million and look how shit it looks. Like, that's not the reaction you want. You want people to go, clearly these guys had very, very little. Clearly this is a sort of homemade submarine set that kind of looks like old Roger Corman movies or something like that. Not even that good. So you don't want people to be too harsh on it, but at the end of the day, it's like, if people are watching these films, they've got to enjoy low budgets and understand low budget to some extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's why people sort of put the price out there, but I don't think it's always super wise, because I people who hire me, they listen to podcasts and they say, I heard you on the podcast and it was really interesting what you said about this, and I want to work with you. So you got to be careful what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, if it's any consolation, this podcast does not have a huge number of listeners, so
You'd be surprised though who find, because people will just search your name or search the film, and
that's true. And the listeners I do have are disproportionately likely to be industry professionals, or especially indie filmmakers themselves. So yeah, I've found that the people who are more comfortable giving exact dollar figures for budgets and things like that, and for revenue, tend to be people who are self-financing their micro budget films, and they don't have to worry about that in the future. So that makes sense. And
some people come along and they make a movie, and then you see them on the festival circuit, and then you don't hear a thing from them for the next 5 years. And then they appear again with a new movie, and that's how they sort of gradually build up their career.
Yeah.
But someone like me, who I'm making 2 movies at least per year.
Yeah.
I need to be careful about those types of things, because it's literally like, it's my income.
Yeah. That makes sense. Your attitude and work ethic and work style remind me a great deal of Roger Corman. I know that's at least the 3rd time we've brought him up here.
I love Roger Corman, and he's such a influence, and he's like one of the wisest guys to like listen to, just sort of like talking about filmmaking and stuff. He's got in the past, he's had like some bad he says some bad advice, really. Like, he is the guy at the end of the day who said, like, put tits and monsters in every 10 minutes and you're all good. No, he's a legend, and yeah, he's got an amazing body of work. Like, maybe these types of independent films wouldn't even exist without someone like him making the way for it. So you have to respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. Near the beginning of our conversation, you talked a lot about how you perceive British film and yourself as a specifically British and specifically English filmmaker. I'm curious, what do you see in British cinema, and especially independent filmmaking, and what would you like to see more of?
Oh well, I generally just hate what Britain makes. You know, like the British stuff is garbage. You know, and
There's your pull quote for your next producer listening to this.
yeah, but you know, I'll be sat in the cinema, and then the trailers will come up for the Hollywood blockbusters. There's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that looks brilliant, and there's this and there's that. And then the little indie, you know, the little logos will come up for the English stuff. And here we are as another working class family on the council estate in a gritty kitchen sink naturalistic drama. And there, don't get me wrong, there is totally a place for those types of movies, and there's some brilliant movies in that sort of genre that have been made. But it seems to be that everything from Britain has to be this one thing, you know, and it picks me
Interesting.
off because I mean, Britain actually does have an amazing legacy of horror,
Yeah.
but you know, when the BFI are doing like screenings of horror films, they won't even say like horror season. They would never use that dirty word. It's like it's dark art season at the BFI. You know, they have to make it sound all classy. Um, but you know, when I was at film school, I really wanted to go and do a master's at you know, I actually live right near one of the best film schools in the world, where you can go and do a master's in directing, and the directors come out and they win BAFTAs for their short films. It's really like a fast pass into the high end of the industry, and they were just flat out, if you want to do genre here, it's not the place for you. Like, we would
Wow.
not let you do a genre script here. And I'm raised on Lucio Fulci movies and Italian cannibal splatter films,
Love
and
those.
that's what I want to make. You know, these
Yeah.
types of I like these types of movies, you know, and I'm not interested in making Lawrence of Arabia. Boring, boring, boring. I don't like the film one bit. You know, I do have, I should say, I do have an appreciation for classic films, and like I like all genres, not just horror. But you know, I'm would rather be watching The Devil's Rejects or something. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you use the phrase genre film, which I mean, of course, people use that phrase all the time. I've always found myself kind of annoyed by that phrase because all films are in genres,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
romantic comedies and dramas and tragedies and everything, musicals. Those are all genres. It's not
uh-huh.
just science fiction and horror.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's a shame that that so-called genre films are looked down upon, but also in a way I think it's kind of freeing because you're not a part of that big industry machine, and I'm very confident that the people you just described who are all winning BAFTAs with for their short films and congratulating each other, I'm very confident that there's a lot of petty politicking going on in there that you
Yeah.
are not that you don't have to deal with because you're outside of that system.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, you know, because I've been doing this for a few years now, it's like you do reevaluate your goals. And obviously, my goal is to, you know, keep going up and up the ladder. And I would love to be making films for studios. I would like to be making, you know, The Conjuring 5 or whatever. You know, I would like to be there one day. But
Oh,
then,
please
you know, you
don't.
wouldn't.
Well,
Well,
specifically The Conjuring. Sorry, I have a grudge against that
okay, fine,
series,
but
but
yeah, yeah, but you know, you'd love to be working for people like that, and you know, I think we're all sort of making these movies hoping that some of these people reach out to you, and you know, which actually has happened with me. You know, I've had trailers go out, and on the same day the trailer goes out, companies, you know, like the people that make The Conjuring, get in touch with me and they'll say, you know, oh, we've watched your trailer, send us the screener, we're, you know, we're watching, basically we've got our eye on your work. So they are out there and they are sort of paying attention to all the levels of the industry.
that's good.
um but yeah, I do have to wonder, like, would I even really enjoy doing a film where it's like, you know, you have to jump through so many hoops and it's filmmaking by committee. I like doing it. I really, really love doing it independently. I like to be completely in charge. Um,
Yeah,
I
you
know, and
mentioned.
like, it's really frowned upon to write the script, direct the film, produce the film, and then by accident, I ended up becoming my own director of photography, which I never had any plan to do. I don't like technology and I don't like cameras, but just like midway through my filmmaking, I ended up, not working anymore with my director of photography, and I had no choice. I had to take over doing the cinematography, and it was like super freeing for me because it used to be that you'd sit and wait for an hour rehearsing with the actors while the lights were being done, and then when the lights were finished, you'd look through the camera and go, well, that's not what I asked for. That's not what I had in mind. And sometimes you just have to shoot, and sometimes you have to wait then another half an hour for all the changes to be made. And then I suddenly realized when I was doing it myself, the films looked more rough and scrappy, but I was saving hours upon hours because you could just get it right the first time. And you knew sort of the shots that didn't need that much fancy lighting. You're only going to be on it in the edit for a second and, move on. So anyway, long story short, I've ended up taking on the directing of photography as well and a little bit the editing. So it's frowned upon to do all of that stuff. But for me, my number one passion is writing. And to me, the way this works is I'm watching horror movies, I'm consuming horror movies as a fan, and then one day out of the blue, a movie pops into my head. It's my new, fresh, original idea. I see it, I see the lighting, I see the whole look of it, I see everything I want. And all I want to do is bring that to the screen. And when people interfere, they're kind of messing it up, like by
Yeah,
interfering with it. When the producer says, "Oh, could you add this little bit here and could you add that there?" It never really totally works. I mean, all I can really go off is my instincts as a film lover, and so that's what I just go with. And the way I'm doing things now, I've been able to deliver these horror films one after the other with they're completely unscathed, some of them straight out of my brain straight onto the screen. Most of the time budget is the big obstacle, and budget what makes them fall apart. But imagine if somebody handed over $1 million to me, maybe I could make a really awesome movie and it just could be completely me. I mean, like, what filmmaker doesn't dream of that?
yeah, yeah. And it's wild thinking about the scale of to say that $1 million is this dream budget when there are movies made for such a huge amount more than that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So when those movies pop into your head, are they like fully formed with all of the scenes, or are they just like, oh, I have a mental image of these creatures attacking people on a barge, and I want to build a story around that.
Pretty much 90% of the movie sometimes can appear.
Oh
Like,
wow.
it will just pop into my head in an instant. Like, usually it's a culmination of, I'll be watching, like, I might be watching a haunted house movie and I'll be thinking, oh, I really want to do a haunted house movie. That would be so cool. And then a year later, I see something in another movie and it clicks. And that's the idea for that haunted house movie. And I didn't know that I'd spent an entire year thinking about a haunted house movie, but I had. My brain was ticking along the whole year, coming
All
up with all
right.
this, kind of like subconsciously. And then you see that one thing that suddenly gives you the inspiration. And then I can then sit down and I can write the whole thing out. And that's it. The whole thing is there, you know.
Okay. So you mentioned transitioning to doing your own cinematography. Um, if I wanted to watch a movie of yours from before and after that change that most shows it off, which two movies would you recommend?
You would need to watch A Werewolf in England because less than half of the movie is shot by my cinematographer from back in the day, and the other half, well, more than half, is shot by me. In fact, half of the movie is shot on a red weapon camera with a lens, a gigantic 2 feet long zoom lens.
Oh wow.
And then
Okay.
the rest of the movie is shot on a Blackmagic pocket camera
Yeah.
with vintage photography lenses that were £20 each on eBay. So it's radically different. I tried my
Grab your
best
set of 5
to,
primes or something.
yeah, basically. I mean, I tried my best to match it. But yeah, I would say, and so that one, and also maybe in a way, maybe my film Death Ranch, and then compare that to, I guess maybe Freeze is my. I mean, I'm talking about the films that are already out and released. I mean,
Of course.
Freeze is mine, even though the Gods of the Deep has only come out this month. Freeze is my most recent release of a film I shot. You know, like I shot Freeze over a year after Gods of the Deep.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yes. Oh, okay. I see
Yeah.
what you.
So even though Freeze came out over a year ago, that is my most up-to-date released movie. And then, I mean, I've got a whole bunch in the pipeline that some of them are done. I'm just waiting for them to be released, where the cinematography is just, improving every time. But, I do sometimes read comments about like movies, and, you get really slated when you're making films and they don't look like Hollywood, and people aren't used to, people are used to seeing Hollywood and CGI, and then they see your movies. And I've seen comments where people say, this looks like a student film. This looks like it was shot on iPhone, and they can kind of like knock your confidence. But, I've watched Freeze a whole bunch of times now, actually in a cinema, in an audience of people, because we did Fright Fest and we did the HP Lovecraft Festival. And even a couple of weeks ago, I was up in Liverpool watching it on the big screen, and I'm very happy with my technical skills now as a cinematographer. And again, that was shot on just Blackmagic, but I've now upgraded to Red, and so I'm happy, I'm confident, and it's a nice position to be in where I can depend on myself to do my own cinematography.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that that with such a low budget that you're willing to like rent a Red for these movies.
Well, I'll tell you, my cinematographer owned the Red and 60 grand
Oh.
worth of lights and camera kit. And
Oh, okay.
he would come on from Cannibal Farm onwards, he would come on, and he was not paid for Cannibal Farm. He was just doing it as a hobby. The same for House of Violent Desire. So, I mean, if you go and watch House of Violent Desire, that's one of my most beautiful films. And then you watch like films that came later, then they don't look as nice. And that's because I had to go back to square one and kind of learn a whole new skill. It was like being back on a film set for the first time,
Yeah, interesting. So just thinking about, because now I'm curious to watch these and make these visual comparisons.
Yeah.
In Werewolf in England, was that shot at all chronologically? Like were your old DP's parts near the beginning and yours in the second half, or?
Sort of, yeah. His stuff is more towards the beginning.
Okay.
In A Werewolf in England, there's a moment where the innkeepers kind of go crazy, and there's a great big action scene. Everything up to then, not everything, but a lot of it up to then was shot by him, and then everything that comes after pretty much is shot by me. But there's huge advantages to it, because, for example, when it was him, the action is kind of stiff because the camera weighs a ton, and the whole you've got this huge 2-foot long lens. And then when I take over and it's all handheld and it's me actually doing it myself with this teeny little Blackmagic, suddenly the action takes off, and you're flying through walls with the werewolves, and you're getting fire flung at you, and everything becomes way more to me, I prefer it. Like I love small cameras, and the way I work, in fact, one of the tricks of how I work, because people say to me, how do you make the films look like they look when you've got so little money, and how do you make so many of them, and all of this sort of thing. But one of my major tricks is, as I said, I don't like the technology, and I hate to get bogged down in the technology. For me, a perfect set would be like I'm there with my actors. I don't even really want to know that the camera and all the technology. I don't want to know that it's there. Like I'm not interested in that stuff. It all just delays the drama. So for me, I'll be with my actors. I'll be rehearsing. We're having a great time. And then I would love it for the camera to just be this little thing in the corner of the room that they don't really even notice, you know. So I've always loved tiny little cameras. I have now a Red Komodo. I bought it because I was excited that Red had made, this teeny little camera. It's like a little Rubik's cube that you can hold in your hand. As soon as I knew these things even existed, I was like, I need one, because to me, that's perfect. And I like to use little lights, and I like to use a very, very, very small crew. A lot of the time, actually in the room filming on the set will be me and my sound man, and that's it, and the actors. I don't need anyone else to be there. Off to the side, maybe makeup is watching, but I like to keep things really small, and that's just easy, especially when you're shooting action, which not many indie filmmakers can do action. It's so time consuming and it's complex. But in my films, I will stop and do a 10-minute non-stop action sequence. And I think part of why I can do that is because I'm so portable, and I keep everything so light and so easy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I find that the indie films that I watch either have like very little action in them, or it's horror action rather than like a choreographed fight, or they're just like all action, and that's the thing that the filmmaker focuses on.
Well, filmmakers think that because they had the Alexa, and because they had 20 people on the crew, and because they had a light on a crane, they think this is going to make the film really good, but it really truly doesn't. Nobody can really tell. Even if they think that they can. I mean, the joke's on them. They've spent all that money, and then there's people like me who, can just be running around with a handheld camera, and the for horror specifically, it's visceral and the adrenaline is there, and it's working. I mean, for me, like the peak of horror is like films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that doesn't need all of this crap.
Yeah.
Like some films do need it, but not all films do need it.
Yeah. Speaking of horror with people running around with a handheld camera, would you ever make a found footage film? That seems to line up with the easy to produce rapidly thing that you focus so much on.
Well, this is maybe an important point to make. Like, I hate found footage films. It's cheap, it's lazy. So like, I am a fan of classic. Like, if you watch my films, like, you can see I'm a fan of. When I say classic filmmaking, I guess I'm talking more about like 70s and 80s filmmaking. To me, those are the classics. But
well, 50s, 60s, Roger Corman.
I'm not a huge fan of those, to be honest.
Okay.
But
all right.
I feel like cinema really peaked in the 70s and the 80s, and I like to use that sort of type of style of cinematography, and that sort of style of using the dolly and how I use light and shadow and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I'm not advocating to be cheap and lazy. It's like I'm kind of saying the opposite. It's like you can make things smaller and more compact to make your film better. I'm saying that it doesn't stop you from being lazy just because you've got all of the fancy gear. You could still be completely incompetent, and you see it all the time. You see people who've got all this stuff, but they're not. Their horror scenes are not thrilling me. I can see where they are kind of actually lazy. They might have had the kit, they might have had the money, but they're lazy. But then there is a flip side. I'm not saying all found footage is lazy, because there's some brilliant found footage stuff. But it's, to me, I could never do it, because I'm like, when I'm I love the language of those older movies, and I don't want everything to be handheld. Like there is a time and a place for handheld. Um, and a whole found footage film is basically all handheld and all from one POV. I want to be able to. I want to use the language of horror films, and there's only one language to a found footage movie. I
Okay.
want to be able to use all the different shots, all the different lenses. So that's why I don't like it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that in-depth analysis of it. I personally I enjoy both styles quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
You're right that they are doing they're speaking different ways. I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say different languages, but yeah, they
Uh-huh.
definitely have different dialects.
Yeah, yeah.
So just thinking about British horror, modern British horror films, the
Mhm.
most recent British horror film I've seen, not counting yours, was Unwelcome, which came out last year.
Uh-huh.
Have,
Uh-huh.
have you seen that one?
I've only seen the trailer for that.
Oh, okay. I don't remember the trailer for it, but I found it very amusing because it does start in a dour, realistic apartment building.
Of
Um,
course.
but then quite soon, quite early in the movie, they go, you know what? Actually, living here is terrible. We're moving to a small town, and then the rest of the
Right.
movie takes place in a small town.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because as I've been explaining, I fell in love with movies and horror movies by watching American horror movies.
Hmm,
And for example, Cannibal Farm is, I wanted to make something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like looks wise, that was the look and feel I was going for. The story of the film is absolutely radically different. It's almost the anti Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, but then you kind of look at it and you're kind of like, well, what am I doing? Because really, you should be out in America if you want to make that sort of movie. And
hmm.
there was a movie that I was making, is a killer scarecrow movie, and I started I started pre-production on it, and I was going to shoot it in England, and then I actually stopped myself one day, and I thought, of all the movies that get made, there are people in America making killer scarecrow movies in America with those great big cornfields and those big open American landscapes. Why am I even attempting to do this in England? Because it's just not gonna look the same, and I'm just gonna look like a fool. So I called the whole film off, and then
Interesting.
uh, a couple of years later, the opportunity to make it came up again, and I shot it in Tennessee. And it's
Ah,
like,
oh, okay.
so now it's done. But I just sat on it for a couple of years because it just wasn't the right time. So I've now shot 3 movies in America that like have that sort of American vibe and American feel. And I feel like maybe my ideas for shots and my ideas for cinematography excel more over there because those are my influences.
Hmm.
Um, but it's more of a challenge. Like maybe this sounds weird coming from someone who actually lives in England, but it's like it's a challenge to look at England and go, how do I make this look cinematic? You know, how am I going to make people watch this and go, yeah, that looks good, that looks like a movie, instead of just looking like, what am I watching? What is this ugly place?
Oh my goodness. Wow. All right. Um, yeah, you're talking about the influence of Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Cannibal Farm, and how it is actually quite different. Uh, while I'm looking at the poster for Cannibal Farm, which very much looks like a poster for for a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film.
Yeah.
That makes me wonder, how much are you involved in the production of like the posters and the marketing material and anything like that for your movies?
Too often it's not at all, like completely zero, uh, zero. I have nothing to do with it whatsoever. Sometimes I don't even see it until the movie is released, and
Mm.
it can actually be completely soul crushing when you've worked for 6 months to a year, flat out every single day of the week on a project, and then you know suddenly it comes out and the artwork looks completely diabolical, and often they'll just change the title as well, like to something awful, and you've got no
Really?
control over it. Oh yeah, they'll change the titles. So for example, Werewolf Castle, I made under the title Silver Blade, which is like, the idea was it being like Silver Bullet, but it's medieval with knights, so it's Silver Blade.
Yeah.
We made it as Silver Blade. We shot this film called Silver Blade, and then when it came out, it's Werewolf Castle. Got some random dude on the cover, some random wolves on the cover, and in the case of Werewolf Castle, they've even printed the synopsis for the wrong movie on the back of my DVD in the UK. So you couldn't screw it up anymore, So that's really disheartening.
What's the accurate synopsis and what did they write?
Well, I pitched them a sequel to A Werewolf in England that
Okay.
involved the characters Archie and Horace and all these people involved in that, going and finding I think it was vampires or something, maybe in a castle, or maybe it was, I can't remember now, but they printed that synopsis instead of the actual synopsis.
Oh my
So,
goodness. Oh wow.
so these are the sort of things you have to contend with. But like in the case of Cannibal Farm, it was only my second DVD release, but I did actually say to them, I'm not letting you have the rights to this movie unless you have to use images from my movie on the cover of the movie. Because I mean, the worst of the worst is the Dead Man Apocalypse cover. If you buy Dead Man Apocalypse and watch the movie, you're in for a surprise, because it's two completely radically different things. And again, that wasn't my title, Dead Man Apocalypse. What does that even mean? What is Dead Man Apocalypse? Who knows? Where do they come up with these ideas?
Yeah. What was
But
the original title?
it was Labyrinthia, which, I see why they changed it, because what's Labyrinthia? But it could have been better than Dead Man Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially because earlier in our conversation, if I recall correctly, you said that sometimes they would come to you with a title and say, make a movie with this title. And I thought you gave Werewolf Castle as an example of that.
I did. Well, they came to me and they said, make Werewolf Castle, a film called Werewolf Castle, put werewolves in a castle. And I then handed in the script. I said, it's called Silver Blade, because we're not going to be making a film called Werewolf Castle where there's werewolves in a castle. I'm just not going to be that. And later it came in that no, we're changing it back to Werewolf Castle. So they never wanted Silver Blade, but they let me go ahead and just make it as Silver Blade,
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You don't like Werewolf Castle, the title, of course, makes me think of the I think it's 1995 Stuart Gordon film Castle Freak, which I quite love. Like, that's a great movie.
I love, yeah.
And but it is very much a movie about a freak at a castle, so the title is right on the nose.
But that's a cool title. But I mean, what I'll say to elaborate on this is, if the movie artwork and title, well, mainly the artwork, if the artwork represents my film, then I'm okay with it. Like Gods of the Deep, for example, the artwork came out. I'm not a major fan of the artwork, but what I love is that they've used my Cthulhu, my submarine miniature. That is the film that you're about to see. You're not going to turn it on and go, what am I watching? This is not what was advertised. Whereas with Werewolf Castle, none of that stuff's in the movie. Like,
that's so insane to me that anyone would do that make a poster with images that aren't from the film.
It's a guy on the cover who's not in the movie. He's just a stock image man. And it's like, I'd write to them and say, please let me put my lead character, who looks, by the way, fabulous, blood everywhere, fangs, contacts, sword, put him on the cover. But no, they don't want to do that. So it's just, I'm all about, like, I have this awareness of, like, when people pick up one of my films and watch one of my films, I don't want anyone to be ripped off, I want them to get what they picked up. So you're just setting yourself up for bad reviews and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, Yeah, looking at the posters here, Freeze and the Barge people very much like, although they are a bit sort of, hey, here's the monster, let's get it right in your face. Uh,
Yeah.
they are both actually representative of what's in the film. Um,
Yes.
I'm going to guess that The Haunting of the Tower of London, The House of Violent Desire, and An English Haunting are, if any of these look like they are not going to be representative, or at least not informative of what's in the
Uh,
movie, it's those ones.
well,
Um,
do you know what? An English Haunting, I actually quite like the poster for it because it reminds me of the People Under the Stairs poster.
okay.
And I
Yeah.
love the People Under the Stairs, and I have like an original quad poster of that poster with the skull in the house. And it is my house that's in the poster. But
Okay, that's good. That's good.
one that was terribly bad was Winter Skin in America. The film is like, it looks like my inspirations were all the old Italian westerns. It's all like old fur coats and like wooden cabin, and
Okay.
the creature in it is just a skinned alive person. And then this cover came out. The guy's got like a automatic firearm, and then there's like all these crazy blue skinned creatures, and that is the worst of the worst. Like, we were mortified when that
Int-
came out.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, you're right. That is the cover I'm looking at right now, and it is.
If you see the trailer for the film, you'll be like, this is two radically different films. So that can actually be really annoying. But the sales agents would always say to me like, well, this is what sells, and we know what sells. And I do, I am only sort of, I'm hoping this is really only like the beginning of my career, and I do not know everything. And it's like, sometimes you do well to listen to what the salespeople are saying,
Yeah.
because they might know better than you.
Yeah.
But people would always say to me, this is what sells, and we got to do this, we got to do that. But I had a bit of an epiphany when I made my movie Death Ranch, because I'd been pitching this movie around, and it's a film about three African American siblings who go and hide out in this ranch, and then realize that the ranch is actually like the main grounds for a KKK cannibalistic cult. And I'd been pitching this film, and people were saying to me, "This is an insane idea. That would be, I love it. It's exploitation, and it's kind of outrageous."
So sort of a
But
more modern 2000 Maniacs.
yeah, I guess. But they would say, but we're never going to make it. We're not going to make a film about cannibal KKK members. Like, it's just, we're not going to do it. And people would say like, that sort of thing wouldn't sell. That sort of thing wouldn't sell. So I found my own funding for it with the help of some producers here, and we made it. And cut to a year later or whatever, there it is in Walmart with a blaxploitation style 70s exploitation front cover, complete with the fonts and the vivid colors and the poster folds, the poster creases in the DVD artwork. This is on the shelf in Walmart, and
What's
even
the title of this?
Death Ranch.
Death Ranch.
And even I'd been told, like, don't put a black person as the lead of your movie because it won't sell the movie, which I've come to decide that I think that was not really industry advice. I think that was just one particular sales agent had a problem with it. At the time I was like, this is shocking that, black people can't sell a movie if you put them on the cover or whatever. But I'm older and wiser now, and it's like, I think that was just one sales agent having a bit of a strange,
Yeah.
slightly racist turn. But to see Death Ranch as it was released changed my whole perspective. It's like, no, do you know what? I knew that people would enjoy a movie like this. I felt in my gut that as a film viewer and a horror fan, I want to see a film like this. And so I just went ahead and did it. I took a major budget cut to make that film. You can kind of tell that it's a real micro budget movie when you watch it. But I was really proud of it. And I think most people regard that as like my best movie that I've done so far. Like, that's my best reviewed film. And people in reviews, I've heard them say, make more films like Death Ranch, you know, and I'll reply to them in the comments. I'd love to just sit here and make exploitation all day, every day, but it's not necessarily going to pay my bills.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of stuff right there. The bit about not putting black people on the poster, I've only ever really heard that in the context of like very, very big motion pictures where you want to have like a lot of sales in China, and it can be a problem there. It's sad to hear that somebody said that about an independent film as well, but it's good to hear that it seems like it was just that one guy saying it.
Yeah.
So
Well, they were completely proved wrong when Death Ranch
yeah.
did 1,000 times better than that other film.
Yeah. Okay, so you are always working on a bunch of different films in different stages of production. What are you working on right now, and where are the various things in the process?
I'm about to go into production on 2 new movies, but I never really speak about my new movies because,
Okay.
I've got a lot of filmmaker friends. I don't like when people talk so much. You end up listening for a year about a project that still has never happened. So I kind of have a rule. I talk about new things. I talk about things I've already done when I've got the experience. But I do have things coming up that are like they're in the past, but they've not been released yet. So obviously, Gods of the Deep just came out. Following Gods of the Deep, there's a film called Night Harvest, which is the killer scarecrow film that I shot in Tennessee.
Okay.
And that was a very difficult shoot. And I want people to watch the movie when it comes out, but there were a lot of difficulties. Following that, I made a film called Lord of Wolves, which is, I was saying earlier about I don't really like films set in modern day, looks ugly, but Lord of Wolves is purposely like it's set in London. I lived in London for 10 years from the age of 18 to 28. And, all of my experiences of living in London have all gone into this movie, which is actually like very heavy on drama as well as horror. It's a sort of like Clive Barker inspired urban werewolf story. So that one's coming up at some point. I don't know the release date of any of these, but they're done. They're just sort of like sat on the distribution line, ready to come out. And then I made a Christmas slasher movie, which it was not my script. It was a different script that I just read and loved. And we shot it in New York. And that is pretty much almost done. Like within the next couple of weeks, that'll be finished. And that stars, it has a few horror people in it, like horror names. One of my lead characters in it is Caroline Williams from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I'm a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, so that was really cool to get to work with her. And we also have one of the girls out of Friday the 13th Part 2, the original Friday the 13th Part 2, who was a phenomenal actress. She's called Lauren Marie Taylor. Really blew me away. So again, that's like me going over and doing like a very American style. It's kind of, I guess it's a little bit like Scream. It's like Scream set at Christmas. So those are the ones I've got that are coming up. They'll all be released this year. And then, the 2 that I'm about to shoot, I wouldn't be surprised if they also get released this year, toward the end of the year. Yeah.
So that would be 5 movies this year?
Yeah, but I had no releases last year.
Okay.
But this is what kind of happens, is like they all catch up. I mean, as I said, Gods of the Deep, I shot in 2021 and it came out this year. And then those other 2 I shot last year, but they'll come out this year. And so this year, everything's just going to come out all at once, which, is hopefully a good thing. And then I plan to capitalize on that and go to festivals and things and really try and get my name out there and my brand out there, because if enough people are seeing enough films popping up with my name on it, I just want to get noticed, so someone can hire me to make the next Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something,
Yeah. That's interesting that you say that Gods of the Deep came out this year, because according to Tubi, it came out last year, but you're right. I only saw the trailer for it a few weeks ago. So
yeah, definitely. It definitely only came out on the 6th of February.
Okay. I wonder what other things Tubi has wrong in their database.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you're in your 10th year of making movies now,
Uh-huh.
and you've certainly been very vocal about your opinions about how the industry and the art form have changed during that time. What do you see in the future of independent filmmaking?
Um, to be honest, like it's very uncertain times. Like last year, everything was hunky dory up to last year, I suppose. The thing is, so when COVID hit, all of the all of Hollywood stopped, and so all of indie film. For example, I spoke earlier about my film that was on the shelf for a year.
Yeah,
That was because Hollywood wasn't releasing anything new. So the independent distributors were putting out these teeny little movies, and they were making huge sales because there was no Star Wars, there was no James Bond, there was none of this big stuff coming, and that usually knocks us
yeah,
off the top spot after 2 weeks or less. But because there was none of that, it could stay there for a year. So when that happened, there was a boom in indie film, and suddenly, my emails were going off. People wanted me to make as many movies as I could possibly make, and I was actually saying no to people for the first time. I'm like, sorry, I honestly cannot make another film this year. There's too many already, you know. And that said, I shot 3 in a row. Werewolf Castle, The Haunting of the Tower of London, and Gods of the Deep were shot 1, 2, 3 in a row. So that was a great time, but then things have got tricky now because of streaming. You know, yeah, it's just difficult. I'm starting to see the budgets are starting to, like, my thing is like every film I make, I just try and make sure the budget is higher than the last film, because then I'm always moving upwards. It might be like really, really, really slowly,
yeah.
and sometimes I might feel down that I've done 15 features or what have you, and I'm still only at this level, and I've still not been handed, a decent sized budget yet. That can be depressing. But at the same time, it's like, hey, I love doing it, and you just keep doing one after the other and keep going up and up. Well, last year, I think it's the first time the budget kind of seemed to flatline.
Hmm.
And usually when I speak to a producer and I say, here's my script and this is the amount I need, they go, wow, you can make all this just for that? I'm like, trust me, I can do it. I can pull it off. They're saying, but you've got the snowy mountains, and you've got the boat, and you've got the fish monsters, and all these people in this period costumes. And I'm saying, trust me, I can do it. I can pull this off.
And
Now
clearly
this
you
year,
can, yeah.
yeah, and then this year, I'm given similar sort of budgets, not even going that radically higher, and people are going, that's kind of a lot for just a horror movie, you know.
Oof.
Can we go down to this level? And it's like, in what world are my budgets a lot?
Yeah,
My
no,
budgets
that's
I view them as the bottom of the bottom, but the problem is they're not the bottom of the bottom, because there are people making films for less than half or less, or even a third of what I'm making my films for, and they're going around having huge successes with them. Like, I don't want to name drop movies or anything like that, mainly because I'm friends with all of these people. uh, but there's people who make 10 or 20 movies a year.
good
uh,
grief.
they can shoot them in 7 days, they can edit them in 3 days, and at the end of the day, if they just need you to click on Tubi and watch the first 10 minutes,
Uh,
then why not do it that way? So people this year have been to me more like, we're looking for quantity. Like, why not spend the money to do 10 films a year where the first 10 minutes are really good, rather than just make 2
mm,
films where every minute is decent. And the flip side of that is, sometimes I have complete disasters on set, and the film's not even very good. Like, I'm the first to admit when one of my films turns out to be a complete dud. It's like, it doesn't always go to, in fact, it rarely goes to plan. I've got maybe 5 or 6 films I'm happy with of my movies, and all the rest kind of went wrong. But I'm fighting a losing battle with the budgets I have. So it's a miracle that I've made it go right 5 or 6 times. But so they're looking at the 2 films. They can't really tell the difference between a film that was shot in 22 days on this budget, where the actors were all paid a fair wage, to a film that was shot in 7 days, where the actors were paid £25 a day. They can't tell the difference, and it all goes into the same streaming platform. So who cares anyway? So it's a difficult time. Then again, I was a huge fan. Last year I went to the world premiere, or no, it was the year before last. I went to the world premiere of Terrifier 2.
Yeah.
And
I
loved the movie. I was obsessed with it. I still love it. And then it was such a huge success.
Yes.
Making all this money. So then I see that and I go, well, it can't be that bad, because look at this movie, this like super, super gory 2.5 hours or whatever it was, horror movie that just goes right back to the old school. I mean, if I spoke to one of my producers and I said, I want to make a movie with a killer clown, they'd say, yeah, it's been done, it's not interesting. People want dinosaurs, people want earthquakes. But then here's, Damien Leone going out with something that's been done 1,000 million times by now, but he's just doing it so well. And so that's exciting. So that really actually gives me huge amounts of hope. And I'm not going to talk about it, but I have devised a plan of how do I break out of this system of being dictated to what I'm going to make on what budget, and then it's completely out of my hands. Like every film I make, I do own some of the back end, but I kind of wipe my hands of it goes away. But I have a plan that's been sort of turning away in the background, and we will see it come to fruition this year, where I will have complete ownership and control of like something that is entirely mine. And for the first time, I'll be able to say, like, horror fans, here is what I want to be making, and I will promote it in a way that every penny of it comes back to me. So I will promote it because, I'm here on a podcast talking about Gods of the Deep, but there is never any press for these movies. This is why I say I don't know how people find these movies. I mean, I know Gods of the Deep has managed to get around on Tubi, and I know people are watching it. I see comments coming in and stuff like that. But I could go around and promote it, I suppose. But what do I kind of stand to gain from it? I know at this stage I'm not really going to see any of the back end of the movie. My time and energy is better spent. My time and energy is better spent focusing on things that are going to benefit me and my babies. The horror films I really want to put out there. So what I tend to do is I try and do one podcast at least per film, so that I can always go back and listen to 2 hours of me talking about Gods of the Deep and stuff like that. But that will be the last podcast. I don't need to spend my time doing any more than that.
All right. Well, I would love to talk with you about the one that you're actually going to own outright once that's an option.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I got
I'll be on every podcast talking about that because I will want everyone to see it, because every penny from it will go back into my own pocket.
Yeah. And I'm glad I got you for your one podcast for this one.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was the last question that I had in mind for you. As we sign off, is there anywhere you would like to direct people to watch your things or to follow you on social media or anything like that?
Yeah, well, just like you said, go onto Tubi or wherever, just type my name. People always say to me, where can I see your movies? Or how do I find them? But it's like, just type my name and they'll all come up. So just, even if you go onto Google, just type my name, you'll find them. So yeah, please do that. Please watch movies. Please watch the good ones, Death Ranch, An English Haunting, those ones, Freeze. And then if you want to follow me, I'm at Dark Temple Films on X, and I think I'm at Charlie Steeds on Instagram.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on and talking with me about all those stuff. Even if it will not be financially remunerative for you, I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, it's been really fun.